Hi everyone, Mature Simmer here. Welcome to Misty Hills in the fall. Should be set to be able to harvest here. And obviously I don't know where I have my crops. Crazy me. So we're running into a situation here. It is later, but sometimes we run into stuff like this. I don't think it's going to help me a lot, but you know, where there's rain on its way. I was getting set up, was chatting with Nick for a bit, just kind of talking about the realities of the impending weather here. So unfortunately we're kind of on this path of must go quickly. I probably should have checked the server earlier because I've kind of been doing other things for an hour, where obviously if I could have gotten an hour of harvest in, that would have been pretty nice. So but in any event, I can't go back in time, but as we've been talking about, I can avoid time syncing here on the server until we have something else going on. So, which is basically once it starts to rain, then we can run it forward, because right now it should be synced up to basically 8 o'clock. So we're looking at, you know, several hours that it'll move, which, you know, the only issue is if we're somehow able to harvest for another hour or so before the rain actually arrives, then we're not going to be able to gain that same time space. So, said another way, in case I'm confusing people, because honestly I feel like it's not a real clear explanation. We're 2.5 hours off now, so if I synced, we'd move up 2.5 hours, and obviously whatever would be happening in 2.5 hours would blow by us. The benefit we get if the rain starts in the next hour, so in essence that's kind of what we're hoping for, is, or I'm hoping for. I didn't really talk about that with him, but you know, if that happens, say before 6:30 server time, and we start getting rain, what I'll do is at that point I'll hop out of the harvester, I'll go and I'll sync, and I'll move us up to 9, which is the farthest ahead I can go. You know, that is a difference again between FS19 and this. In the time sync capability we had in FS19, we were able to just pick a time, you know, at the top of the hour all day long and go fix it and go do that, which is what I would prefer, because you know, there were times like, hey, I can get on at lunchtime or something, and if I could then, oh, the server's off 2 hours, I just move it 2 hours, and it just gave me more flexibility to sync. Here we basically can do between 5 and 9 a.m. and that's it. So, you know, and the nice thing is, if it's, say, a little shower here that is going to last 2 hours, it may vanish just in the time sync. Like, it may come through and we're ready to harvest again at full capacity, because in FS22, if you recall, rain is going to decrease your yield. So you would not want to be harvesting in the rain. So what will happen if I sync up and then it's still raining is, unfortunately, then I'm going to have to basically stop and you know, just keep checking when I can. And the challenge is, again, just like I've always said, you know, I have windows of opportunity, and you know, those windows, trying to pick up the header here because I'm going to turn around, because otherwise, in essence, just having the header down and going over the field, even though there's like nothing there to harvest, will, let me not do that, will cause weeds to spring up, because it basically does that weed planting that, you know, kind of happens or spreads around and so forth. So, yeah, so my preference was, you know, I have, in essence, you know, 2.5 hours or so right now that I can probably use for Farming Simulator if I need to, and that time probably won't even be enough to get this whole field done. I'm pretty sure this is a 3 or 4 hour job, if I recall. So, you know, I'd prefer there wasn't rain coming, but on the other side, you know, we've honestly had much less weather-related delays since in the 10 years I've been here on Shellbrook than I did in Hilly Seneca, or in Seneca. Server name we had was Hilly Seneca, but so let me get the GPS set here now. Tap danced around a bit, got myself set, but now we've got ourselves the rows so that we can go, and now I can do the long edge here, get that done, and then rotate. You know, it seems to be my new preferred method. So as you've seen, obviously I cut the headlands along the river so that I have room to maneuver. You know, we're only going to need to go about halfway across this field before I zip along. So, so yeah, returning kind of the rain, the yield, whatever. You know, when I got on, my initial thing to Nick was, "Hey, ready for the server sync?" And as I typed it, I looked at the weather icons and saw, "Oh, we've got rain coming." So we should probably leave it, and if nothing else, you know, because I knew I needed to harvest, I was going to take advantage of, well, it's not raining yet. So, you know, and again, and those are one of the quirks, I guess you could say, and kind of what happens with time sync, that, you know, we're allowed in that regard. You know, there's not any rules or guidance against, hey, if you get on, you know, you're not allowed to harvest before you sync. If rain is coming, it's unfair, blah, blah, blah. You know, nothing like that is explained, and I think that would be, you know, I mean, you know, obviously people would live with what they needed to live with, I guess. But I couldn't say with certainty that there wouldn't be, like, really? I mean, because unless you've just gotten super lucky and let your server run out. I'm just paying attention to the end of my field run here, because the question is, am I even going to have anything to harvest here yet? Yeah, it looks like it might actually touch the edge. It's going to be close, so yeah, I probably should just drop, yep, because almost immediately we're picking stuff up. Alright, it didn't seem like we'd have to be all the way at the edge to start, but we are, so. And I knew I'd be very disjointedly speaking as I was thinking and trying to talk at the same time, so I'm sure you guys have seen tons and tons of examples of that, and hopefully it hasn't irritated people enough where they're like, alright, this is the point, I'm going to shut the video off, or I'm going to skip, you know, 10 minutes ahead and see if he's talking normally again. But, you know, there would be some complaints, I think, if that wasn't allowed, for, you know, and once again, it's one of those, I'm sure part of the reason it's not even brought up, if they were going to try to be that dictatorial about it, is you'd never really know unless someone said something. I mean, because it's not as if they pop into every server every couple hours to make sure everything's, you know, in sync or whatever, and if not, it's someone working on it. I mean, that would just take a boatload of policing for, you know, very, very little purpose, because what I was kind of pointing out is unless you happen to get lucky, like, you've got a mayor on your server that doesn't sync for days at a time, and your server has drifted like 8 hours. First off, I'd make the argument, like, you're not even going to see the rain icon on there, so you wouldn't know, so you probably would sync anyway, and then you'd have, then it'd be a moot point, because you'd have synced, and then whatever weather is going on at the time that it really is, that your server should be set to, is what you'd be experiencing and working with. But, let's say the icon appears and, there's a 3 or 4 hour window. I mean, you might get that, and sure, that would let me get my entire crop off this field, but it's not going to happen that frequently. It's not like it's something you can exploit often, and that's really usually where there are rules in FSN, is things that can be manipulated in a way to create artificial benefits that others may not be doing, who have a more diligent mayor who's syncing every day, kind of doing what I'm doing, where at least every other day, unless I'm just not around, if I'm away and so forth, then it might be, well, we're not doing that. But so that's why we decided not to sync right now, because there is a benefit to that, where otherwise it would be raining. And so, the reality I've seen is usually once that icon's up, you might get 2 hours. So what I don't know, and I didn't ask Nick about, is, was he on when the icon appeared, and how long ago was that? So anyway, while I'm thinking of it, now that I've got myself going along, let me go look at the weather. Alright, so in this case, it looks like we, in essence, are in a window like what I talked about. According to the forecast right now, 9 o'clock is when it's supposed to start raining in that vicinity. And obviously that could mean, probably any time after 8:30. The 8 o'clock icon wouldn't have anything on it. I mean, that would be logically, if I'm a weather person and I'm creating a weather forecast, I mean, that's easy enough to explain, and it's probably what most people, just like I am assuming here, would understand how you figure things out. That, hey, if it's going to start raining at 8:31 or later, and again, if you can forecast that well and you're accurate, well, hey, you're probably one of the best weather people ever made. But if it's 8:31 or after, then yes, in an hourly forecast, you're going to report 9 o'clock as rainy, but you wouldn't report 8 o'clock as rainy. Where if it's before 8:30, so if it's 8:15, 8:29, you would. You would go ahead and report it at the 8 o'clock time in your hourly forecast as rainy. And so that's what I'm taking that as, is we have at least 3 hours at this point, or very close to it from here, before anything will be there. So Nick said he had one more field. Nick's also one of the newer FMs, so we also know Nick is likely not got a very large field. He's nowhere near my size. And so he's got one more field to harvest. He's probably going to be fine. I may actually run against the clock before I run against the rain. But what that will mean is I'll pretty much be out of the sync window by the time that happens, because, like I said, literally in an hour, the best I could do is get us to 9. So the only thing I would do is, if I had finished before that, I'll certainly move the server up to 9 o'clock, Okay, we're slightly off here, but I guess we'll move and we'll unload and then we'll get ourselves back where we need to be. But I just was a little bit off on the trailer pulling in. So, but the goal here is, obviously get the crop off the field. I'm going to try to not do anything that is going to, take me 5 minutes or 10 minutes to go poke around with, where I'm not, actively doing something. I mean, obviously I can't go back and harvest now until the harvester is empty, or, you understand, again, if we're being fully logical, yes, I could. I could go with a half-full harvester and I could continue to add, but that doesn't make any sense, because then I've just got to stop earlier. But, my point being, I can't, and yes, the way this truck is, I'm leaving my header up intentionally because I know I can't get past the truck with it down, and then I'd be hitting the field. And yeah, I guess we'd harvest it early and it wouldn't be any problem, but I like to keep my lines neat. As far as I know, I'm not OCD, but sometimes for stuff like this, it's just, let's just do what I did. But yeah, but my point that I was making is, I'm kind of at the point where I want to be very, very effective and efficient in my harvest, so that I maximize every minute, every second, if possible, that I can, that I'm harvesting. Obviously I've got to move a truck over. I've got to, there's things where I am wasting time with movements per se, but that there's no other way to do it. Unless I had a contractor here with me, someone helping that could be operating the other piece of equipment. But even with that, there's going to be a little bit of delay if I'm moving in this direction, for example, where they can't pull under the pipe, and where I have to empty. And that's one of the benefits of soybeans in a situation like this, is the yield is not exceptionally high, because which is the argument is that's why it's profitable. Where you're typically over $1,000 a liter, well over. 1,500. And then in the customs, in direct to warehouse and so forth, some people approach 2,000 per 1,000 liters. So the reason it's that way is because it's a low yielding crop, but that's also why soybeans is pretty good, because it's not supply intensive either. So you don't have to put a lot of seeds in the ground, for example, which is really kind of your impact, because if you remember, fertilizer and herbicide, if that's used, is more dependent on the size of the field. It doesn't change per crop now. Now that will not be the case when we get precision farming implemented. Again, no word on that officially that I've seen about, hey, it's this is when it's coming. The last thing we have is, yep, it's possible. Now, we did get notice that there's maintenance on FS22 servers only coming up in winter. But they didn't say what's coming. I would think something like precision farming would be telegraphed more than that. But it's not. It doesn't change the crop calendar. So the last time we did have kind of the heads up was when they were putting in the crop calendar, which I saw. Those episodes. The climate change FSN style, which was what my thumbnail was called for that. That episode actually just ran 2 days ago. So again, you can kind of see if you're watching these as they come out live, like how much time has passed between what real time is and where it is. So, that episode was done and recorded months and months ago, like a couple months ago at this point. And that's when we got the announcement that we were going to a new crop calendar, and we're told, hey, don't plant any winter things, because we knew that would move growing and harvest windows around, and therefore there may be a direct impact to a crop, to the point where you might plant something and then suddenly you come on the next day and it's withered because now it's outside the window and it's passed through harvest, and so forth. But while precision farming had some impact on a little bit of that, well, no, that was still separated in 19, I guess, if I really think about it. The crop calendars were attached to seasons, and you'd basically do a geo, is what the terminology in the community was, a geopack, where you would say, hey, I'm running a Polish map, so I'm going to find a Polish geo, and I'll load that with my seasons as well. So you would, in your mod load, you'd be loading seasons, and then you'd check a geopack that you were using that would basically establish your crop pattern. And I think your weather to some degree and so forth, but precision farming doesn't do that. It just introduces the ability to do all these other things, including the variable fertilization, which was there before, but variable herbicide with the see and spray and so forth. So then the consumption of materials will change for us, but as of right now, really seeds are what are crop dependent, depending on what variety you're planting. And then, because if you recall, our favorite potatoes, it was almost as if I had cut a hole in the bag and was just pouring seeds into the field directly out of the bag. They were being consumed so quickly, where you could almost watch it count down a liter at a time with something like soybeans, even with a good-sized planter. Where here on the harvest, you can see like it's jumping up in large increments. I'm not going 1 liter at a time. I mean, in the time it takes the screen to update, it's 10, 15, 20 liters every time the number changes. So all of that is kind of then where we're at. I mean, I am frankly very surprised, having gone into the weather, that this icon is out there that far ahead, because that's just not the norm. At least not that I'm used to. When I run into it, the other series I obviously work on for the channel, and the other play I do in single player, both for the Survival Challenge in Risu Forest or the VIP series in Riverview Farm, I've certainly had some rain here or there when I was doing things, and yes, I'm running those on faster speed. They're not in real time like this server is, where it's set to 1, but it still doesn't take 4 hours of game time to get there. It happens in an hour or two, sometimes within 30 minutes or something. And some of that may be that the weather's just kind of like real weather. It's just like a pop-up. It wasn't forecast. It's not supposed to happen at that time. And then suddenly the game says, oh, no, wait, we got rain. And because, I've certainly also seen, and that's where, maybe if I recall and if I've got time, I'll take a look, once the server gets past 6, it's possible the forecast will move out or move up, and then suddenly, because I assume, it seems like a lot of the activity as far as the server maintaining things, crop cycle, so forth, happens at the top of the hour. Again, like pigs are, they're sitting there in theory, they're eating now. But we don't see a change in the food in the pigs until the top of the hour. Speaking of, let me look at that real quick. Oop. We are basically at the point where they need food. Alright, so once again, I looked at it yesterday. I swear there was 7,000, so I was like, I'm good. But I'm going to need to do that as well. And once again, I need to get this crop off the field. And, it's not like they're chickens where they're laying eggs, cows making milk. I mean, at this point, pig health is basically just the value when I put them on a trailer and sell them. And we're still 3 months away from any group of pigs being able to be sold. So the point being there, from a realism standpoint, like I obviously don't want to let them sit there and starve for 2 days, but the reality is also, like, if I top them up anytime today, in a few hours they'll be back up to full health, and and any impact will be removed and mitigated, because then they'll be worth their full value of $1,200 a head that I can go ahead and sell when it's time. So that's just another way of saying I don't need to stop what I'm doing now and go feed the pigs, because they'll be dead in 2 hours if I don't. Again, there's no life impact in FS22 as it sits right now, as it was in FS19, because in FS19, again, they usually, I don't think, died in a few hours. I do think that happened at the turn of the day. If they've been unfed for long enough, animals could die and vanish, but it doesn't happen in FS22. So, I'm probably not any different than others. I mean, there are certain times, not here, because the intent of FSN is we're doing things appropriately and realistically, but in single player, I may not feed animals until I need them doing whatever I'm doing, because I could leave pigs unfed for, say, 3 years if I just wasn't going to sell any pigs, and they'd still be there, and I'd be saving the crops and this and that. So there's certainly ways to do that. I mean, I don't play that way, because it's just, what's the point? I mean, then you're just you're not at that point, you're cheating the system. I mean, that's not how it would work. I mean, it's one thing if, it was a day or two I wasn't on the server, I couldn't get on, but if it just becomes your mode of, well, I only need the pigs at full health every 24 months when there's a group ready to go to market, and so I'll just throw a little food in there so that in a few hours they're ready to go. I'll sell them, and then I'll just leave them foodless for a year and a half in the game. Yeah, that would be against the spirit of how we do things here. So and again, like, those type of things is something that my understanding is that they are monitored to some degree, because there are reasons operations will come onto a server periodically just to do things, check on things, and my understanding is stuff like that. There are spot checks here and there. Think of it as an audit, I guess, where they'll take a look at people and, hey, you've got whatever. And my understanding is, like, with the feeding, I think, like, if they came in, say someone from operations had popped in earlier today, saw that my pigs had no food, I think then they'll come back in a day or two, kind of note that, and then see, hey, if my pigs still don't have food after several days, there'll be, I'm sure I could get a warning or a fine at that point. because what they don't want is, again, people playing that way, and suddenly they're just making more money because they've got more crops, they can sell things and so forth, where obviously I've spent years and years having no crop income on the farm because I've been saving 100% of my crops to build up my ability to feed the pigs. That dynamic would be very different if I wasn't playing into this spirit of the game of how it's supposed to be, which is keep animals fed, because that's what you would need to do. And so in FS19 the dynamic was kind of kept on its own, because the animals would die if you didn't do it. So I think there didn't need to be as much monitoring then at that point. But right now that doesn't happen in FS22, and that was one of the things too that I didn't know until someone brought it up, because it's just I hadn't played with animals, and then someone said, well, if they run out of food, there isn't a danger. And I think that was when we had all the nitrato problems and we couldn't get on our server for days. So it was like, we wanted to do things, but it's like, okay, well, if the servers are still moving along while we can't access them, are we going to get back on and all our animals will be dead? And someone said, well, that FS22, they don't die off, so no, they'll still be there. They may not have any food. And if you go back to those episodes that occurred around that, you'll see that's exactly what happened. I came back in, they had no food. We hadn't been able to be on for I think over a week. So it was like we had half a year, or almost a full year, because it might have been approaching 12 days. And they were still there, where on an FS19 server I probably would have come back to an empty pigsty if that had happened. So that's how I learned about that. And if I'm being honest, I guess I can't say that it doesn't lower my vigilance somewhat about being overly concerned that the pigs never run out of food, which is why I probably let things happen like what we had here, where I was on I think a couple days ago looking at the pigs at least. Well, I'm pretty sure I synced the server yesterday. Well, maybe not. Maybe I was off yesterday, because I knew, initially when we finished, I think we had 5 or 6 months, and I knew I didn't need slurry cleaned up and so forth. So I think I may have backed off a bit and may have skipped yesterday, but but even then, I did look at it and say, yeah, I think they'll be okay until I'm on and ready to feed them. And I'm off a little bit. I mean, they have 96 liters of food, but I think they're at 0 health because they don't have a balanced diet. Yeah, so if you see now, it went to 6, so they went from 96 to 84. So they're eating, the potatoes. It's not, in theory, as if they're starving. They're eating something, but there just isn't enough food to keep them fully healthy, is what we've got going on. So in that regard, and I think that's why stuff like that would be really, really hard to police without an exorbitant amount of rules and conditions around it. Because that's the thing. If we took it to the somewhat absurdist view of if we took the FSN argument to a court of law, I think someone could make a case for, my pigs were not a food. They still had 84 liters of potatoes. I understand they need something else, but they weren't in danger of dying. They had food, where, and if the FSN side is well, but they didn't because they weren't fully healthy. Okay, well, the requirement isn't that they're fully healthy, it's that they have food. You can see how that would go. And aside from the fact, again, it's a game, it's a community where we're trying to be in the spirit of things. Yes, there are rules where if you violate things at a point where management decides, okay, you're just really more trouble than the benefit you bring, you're kicked out of the community and not allowed back in. There's certainly ways for that to happen, and to my knowledge, they don't publicize that, because I believe there's probably certainly some people that have had that happen to them, but we're never told, hey, so-and-so got kicked out of FSN because of this. I mean, you may see that there were arguments occurring about things, and, heated, warnings were coming up and so forth, but, those things take place behind virtual closed doors between FSN management and those individuals. And so other than, if you're on a server with someone, and even then it might just be like, you might just get told, well, they left, kind of similar to when you're at work and someone gets fired. Depending on your employer, you're not always told, well, they got fired. It's, they're no longer here. And that's all you get told, because it's just a privacy thing. So you've got similar things here. All right, I think I'm just going to empty once I get to the end, because I'm not going to be, it's certainly not enough to worry about flipping around. All right. So again, been on here for quite a while. Been chatting for a long time. It's a long enough episode as it is. I'm obviously going to get this work done, or at least get as much of it done as I can before I need to step away. My hope is I get it done, but I don't know that I will. But at this point, I think we've been on for darn near 45 minutes or so, and that's a pretty long episode. So I will simply be back when everything's finished, which, maybe tomorrow, who knows. But, we do have a few days of potential harvest, so things won't wither for a bit, so I'm not really concerned that I'm not going to get the crop off the field entirely. Because you can see I've got, November and December. I can still harvest soybeans if I need to. So there's really no reason to kind of push things through rain and take a yield hit because, I'm never going to get on here and they're going to wither. If these didn't pop till December, that would be different if this was my last day. And I've certainly had things like that before in FS19. The challenge is, once again, in FS19, the way things were structured with seasons is when it rained, your harvester would cease functioning. I mean, you could not harvest. It would just then start running through the crops and killing them. So, because you're just running them over, which I think is more realistic. And once again, if like that came back into how the mods worked in FS22, I wouldn't be upset about it. I mean, it makes sense. Like, wet crops just get mashed down and don't really cut and so forth. And you've got the other issue of just selling it. I mean, throwing it into a silo, all that moisture, it'll probably start to mold, mildew, whatever it is. And your crop would be worth less anyway. But yeah, I'm going to step away, and I will then see you in a bit. I'm back, and just getting done today, so as you can see, still is the same day. As expected, there were rain showers in the middle, so I had to pull off the server for a bit. I did never get to synchronize, so it is server still, whatever it was, 2.5 hours back, as I think I had mentioned the first time. Turn that noisy mechanism off. I don't need all that. Get this loaded. I did have to fill up the harvester with fuel. Luckily, it did not end up dying in the field like it did the one time where I think I had to push something to go get gas. So yeah, it's kind of dawning on me as I'm going through things. I mean, we've talked about multiple times here this year that, you know, we're on the 10th year of the farm here. I filled up my fuel back when I moved on the farm, and obviously, you know, we didn't have the, you know, I guess if we're being fully, whoops, transparent, I gotta, sorry, unfold the piece to be able to tow it. Obviously, I didn't have my yard for everything I did. I mean, obviously I plowed, I did a few other things, but I'm not sure I actually had to fill gas anyway at that point. Like trying to hit the button to just connect the header to my my machine, which obviously isn't going to work. So, but yeah, you know, obviously I didn't have that fuel tank immediately, so there's a little bit, you know, maybe there's 6 months, because I think we got put on here in June, and I did kind of all the work getting things planted. I just wasn't able to harvest until the following year, so I would have used the tractor and stuff like that, but, you know, probably not substantial amounts of gas. But in any event, my point was, I think I'm just finally a little bit below a half of the tank left in diesel, and again, we're like 10 years in, so that tank is doing an incredible job in just holding the fuel supplies we need for the farm here. So I'm gonna try something. I'm like barely gonna touch the workshop, because I think the way this works, yeah, it does, which is nice, but that also will make it easier for something like this to pull through. Now the challenge will be, I may not be able to wash it fully. I'll be able to do this, but I'm not sure I'll be able to get far enough to wash the header. But yeah, we've still got, I mean, we might have gotten below 10,000 liters remaining in the fuel tank, and I think it's a 25,000 liter tank, so, you know, we are below half, but the fact that it's, you know, 10 years in is still, alright, well, I can still move. Like it says, 4 meters, so yeah, I'm actually able to get over here. It's always a challenge of, is it cleaning? I'm looking at the arm. I guess it's getting cleaner. It's hard to tell. Yeah, it's definitely getting cleaner. It's just, the header takes a really, really long time to fully clean up. So yeah, there is a mod that I've seen that gives you a readout on the pressure washer of the percent clean, basically. As you're cleaning a vehicle, it then tells you what percent dirt is remaining. So I think it like starts at a high number, and then, you know, you're basically trying to get to 0 before everything is done. Alright, so we do that. I'll have to get in. Well, I'll leave this on, because again, I usually don't use the other header, but okay. I need to fold it up, because I'm like, whoa. I guess I don't want to fold it up. That was a real mess. Alright, goodness. Alright, so what if I do that now? Just keep moving. Will it? Oh, you know what? Somehow, I didn't even know it would let me do that. It's like folding. Oh, that is so weird. What it was doing is it was folding I have the header selected, and it's folding the header. I thought it was just acting that way because somehow the hitch underneath was doing something, but no, that was literally the header trying to fold up, but it's attached. I didn't even, it didn't even occur to me that the header would fold in that case. I wasn't realizing what I was seeing. I thought the hitch was doing something underneath, and somehow I had it just was ripping it around, and that I just needed to then pull ahead, but that didn't work. Well, anyway, now we're folded up, put away, everything's nice and neat. So let me get the truck now. So we've got, what, 62,687 liters. And then I had 2 trucks outside of this, so 2 full trucks, so we had about 180,000. So that's going to give us basically 240,000, is that right? 160? 222 is what it is. 222,687 is what we got off this field. And then we had a little over 61,000, almost 62,000 in there ahead of time. So I'm still going to kind of leave most of that, if not all of that, for pig feed. So I still have to feed the pigs. I didn't get around to doing that. So I'm going to do that off camera. You guys have seen me feed the pigs enough. And that's all I've got left to do today. So that would just be more, just a little bit of stuff that you've already seen in a pretty long episode, and adding it to the next episode doesn't make a lot of sense, so I'm just going to get that taken care of. But the point being, I'm going to leave enough for pig feed, but I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do with the remainder of this. As far as, will I do in-game sale? Will I do direct sale? Will I run it to the warehouse and let that run for a bit? I haven't done any crop sales in a long, long time, so I've certainly got a few options. Have no idea. And again, I don't think I've sold soy. Certainly not in a long time, and definitely not in FS22. So we'll take a look. We'll see how everything looks, and that will be a future episode of some sort. At this point, I'm not going to rush to get anything in, because what I was starting to think is, I'd literally have to turn around and plant today. I'm certainly not doing that. So I just knew grain could get in with the adjusted calendar at additional times, but that's more if I want to do it early in the spring. If I got it in now, obviously I'd be able to harvest there, where if I get it in March or April, if I do grain, it probably will take a few months into the summer before it really comes out. So, but that's where I'm at this point, and not bad. Certainly in good shape. Glad the harvest is done. Glad I was able to get it done, even with the rain. And then, tomorrow I'll end up syncing the server appropriately. So, I will see you next time.